But we begin at this hour with your update from South Carolina. Now, everyone, including me, has sort of precipitously declared Joe Biden's campaign dead. That's because he finished horribly in Iowa, finished horribly in New Hampshire, barely finished second in Nevada. And so the sort of going wisdom was that he was going to collapse in South Carolina as well. Well, there's some new polling data out, and it's showing that maybe his bet on that South Carolina firewall, maybe he wasn't entirely wrong. There are two new polls out today. One is from East Carolina University, and it shows Biden up 31% to 23% for Bernie Sanders. And a second poll from Clemson University that shows Biden up 18%. 18%. So a blowout for Biden. That follows hot on the heels of a public policy poll that shows that Biden is up 15%, which means that the new poll average in South Carolina shows a big spike for Biden. It shows Biden, this is according to 538, it shows Biden at 31% and Sanders at 21%. If Biden were to blow out Sanders in South Carolina, in fact, there's a new poll that shows that Sanders is actually running below Tom Steyer in South Carolina, believe it or not. If Bernie were to finish third in South Carolina and Biden were to clean up in South Carolina, this radically rejiggers the race in a serious, serious way. Why? Well, suddenly it appears that Joe Biden is a living human being. And that is a massive thing because then we move on to Super Tuesday. And once we get to Super Tuesday, remember, South Carolina has a lot of delegates, Once we get to Super Tuesday, if Biden is cleaning up in the southern states and Bernie is cleaning up in the northern states and say California, you could very easily end up with an incredibly close race. So there are two analyses that are out about this today that are worth checking into because maybe this race isn't quite so over as we were expecting, depending on what happens on everything comes down to Saturday, okay? If Biden doesn't win in South Carolina, the sucker's over, Sanders is the nominee. If Biden wins and it's very, very close, Sanders is still likely the nominee. If Biden wins and just blows Sanders out, if Sanders completely collapses in South Carolina, if he gets skunked in South Carolina, suddenly this looks like a race because you could end Super Tuesday with a very close race in terms of delegate count, and then it is a two-man race, Sanders and Biden, down to the wire, with presumably Bloomberg continuing to pour hundreds of millions of dollars into anti-Sanders ads and all establishment money moving over to Biden because Biden really hasn't picked up a lot of money yet because, frankly, he's a corpse. So 538 has an analysis. They're looking at Super Tuesday. So Super Tuesday, there are a bunch of states that are up for grabs. There's California, Texas, North Carolina, Virginia, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Colorado, Tennessee, Alabama, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Utah, Maine, Vermont, and American Samoa. Those are the states and territories that are open on Super Tuesday. By the way, check out Daily Wire. We're going to have live coverage all evening long on Super Tuesday. Sanders is widely expected to do very well in California. The polls are showing that right now. In Texas, Sanders and Biden are running neck and neck. But if Biden were to blow out Sanders in South Carolina, that obviously changes things rather radically. In North Carolina, Sanders is running slightly ahead of Biden. But again, if Biden does real well in South Carolina, that may change radically in terms of North Carolina. Right now, Sanders is expected to do well in Virginia. But again, that could change radically. Massachusetts, Sanders will win handily, walking away. Sanders is expected to compete pretty evenly with Klobuchar in Minnesota. He's expected to win handily in Colorado. In Tennessee, Alabama, Oklahoma, you should expect a big Biden boost if, in fact, Sanders were to collapse in South Carolina. The same is true of Arkansas, probably true in Utah, probably true in maybe true in American Samoa, but that's like four votes in terms of delegate count. 538 says it should be a good night for Sanders delegate-wise, just as it should be in terms of votes. We're forecasting him to take home 587 delegates. But remember, that's in the average model run, and some runs he gets more, others fewer. But Biden and Bloomberg are also forecasted to get 305 and 211 delegates. Now, this is something to notice. Bloomberg is dropping precipitously in state polls. He is dropping precipitously in national polling. So the flavor of the week is done. Those last two debates have not helped Bloomberg. He's looked incredibly weak. Warren has taken out Bloomberg, basically, which means maybe that those voters go back to Biden if Biden shows that he is not a dead human in South Carolina. Warren, Buttigieg, and Klobuchar are far behind. Buttigieg nets a significant number of delegates only out of California, Klobuchar from Minnesota, and Warren from California, Texas, and Massachusetts in the 538 numbers. But here is the key. Says Nate Silver at 538, these numbers could and likely will change. There's still just under a week before Super Tuesday, plenty of time for the race to shift, as we had a debate on Tuesday night and South Carolina votes Saturday. Even small fluctuations in vote share can greatly affect the number of delegates each of these candidates gets. That's because in order to be eligible for any delegates from a state or district, a candidate has to get at least 15% of the vote there, and many non-Sanders candidates are hovering right around 15% in many states. California is a good example. On average, they say we're currently forecasting Biden to win 17% of the vote there, Warren to win 14, Bloomberg to win 13, Buttigieg to win 10. Because California is worth so many delegates, who gets 15% is super important. If the numbers were right, only Biden and Sanders would get a share of California's 144 statewide delegates. But minor variation could really scramble the picture. So it's a mess. It's a mess. And again, those polling numbers in South Carolina, those late-breaking polling numbers out of South Carolina, they look actually quite strong for Joe Biden going into the election. The last 3 polls out of South Carolina have Biden up average double digits, 18, 15, and 8. Okay, and Biden's got some momentum in South Carolina. James Clyburn is, of course, a very influential congressman from South Carolina, particularly with the black community in South Carolina. He came out today, gave a big speech about Joe Biden and why he's endorsing Biden. Here was Clyburn endorsing Biden.
I am fearful for the future of this country. I'm fearful for my daughters and their futures and their children and their children's future. This country is at an inflection point. It is time for us to restore this country's dignity, this country's respect.
Okay, so he endorses Biden. That, of course, is going to help Biden pretty significantly. I'm going to get to another thread from Bill Scher, who is a national polling analyst for Politico and Real Clear News, looking at some of these scenarios on Super Tuesday that put Biden in the thick of it if he were to win South Carolina. Everything comes down to South Carolina. So there's a lot of drama here. There is. We'll get to that in just 1 second. First, let's talk about the reality that Democrats may be poised to nominate an actual communist in Bernie Sanders. Socialism is on the rise. Why? Because people do not understand that socialism is bad. They don't understand why. Young people particularly have no familiarity with the actual effect of nationalizing industry. They don't have any sort of principled opposition to it. This is why you need to join with groups like FreedomWorks to fight socialism. Well, FreedomWorks is doing something pretty clever. They are working with Senator Steve Daines. Senator Daines is proposing a resolution condemning socialism in America. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, that's just for the press. Well, it's forcing Democrats to either associate with socialism or not, which gets them on the record, which, as we will see when it comes to Joe Biden, is a very good thing. If you'd like to help push this resolution, please text Ben, that's my name, Ben, to 41490. Sign their petition today. The folks at FreedomWorks are fighting hard against the nationalization of industry and the destruction of American freedom. Go check out my friends at FreedomWorks today by texting my name, Ben, to 41490. Again, that is 41490. Text my name, Ben. Sign their petition condemning socialism today. And that also allows them to contact you so that you know about upcoming things you can do, grassroots efforts to stop the agenda of the left. Go check out FreedomWorks right now. Condemn socialism. Text Ben to 41490. That's 41490. Okay, so as I say, Bill Scher over at Twitter has a really fascinating thread in which he analyzes a few different scenarios for what happens on Super Tuesday. He says, let's take South Carolina, 2 different scenarios. Scenario number 1, Biden wins 40 to 25 over Bernie, and that translates to identical wins in Alabama, Arkansas, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, and Virginia, meaning that he starts to blow Bernie out in these southern states. Bernie does the reverse in California, Colorado, Maine, Utah, and crushes Vermont. He wins Massachusetts narrowly over Warren, with Biden at 20%, Klobuchar over Bernie by 5 in Minnesota. In that particular scenario, Sanders walks away with 679 delegates on Super Tuesday. Biden walks away with 642 delegates, Klobuchar 40, Warren 31. That's the optimistic scenario for Biden. Okay, second scenario. Biden wins South Carolina 30-20 over Bernie, with Warren at maybe 15%. And then there's a similar application for all the southern states and the reverse in all the northern states. In that particular scenario, you wind up with Sanders at 514 delegates and Biden at 488 and Warren at like 285. So that is a sort of fascinating, these are fascinating scenarios. And what they show is that this race could be very close. If suddenly Biden has this southern surge, then you go past Super Tuesday, and this thing's basically a dead heat. It really is. And when you look at the electoral map from there, things don't get any less complicated, right? The election calendar for 2020 is not going to get less complicated if we get past Super Tuesday, and this thing is basically a dead heat. After that, you get Idaho, where presumably Bernie performs pretty well. Michigan, where he performs well. Mississippi and Missouri, you'd have to hand to Biden pretty handily. North Dakota probably goes Bernie, but Washington probably goes Bernie. But then you get to Arizona, which likely goes toward Biden. Florida, which certainly goes toward Biden. Illinois, hard to tell. Ohio probably goes Biden. Georgia definitely goes Biden. So this thing gets really dicey really quickly. And remember, the entire Democratic establishment at that point realizing that they have the possibility of stopping Bernie, toss all their support behind Biden. So there is the very real possibility. I mean, we're looking at it right now. There is the very real possibility that if Biden is able to revive his campaign, then he is a real contender even past Saturday. It's a binary. This is binary. Either Biden wins South Carolina or he's done. If he wins South Carolina big, this is a race. If he doesn't win South Carolina big, then this thing is over already. Even if he does win, it's still neck and neck. Now, one of the things that's been fascinating is the fact that nobody can truly attack Bernie effectively. One of the reasons that nobody on the left can attack Bernie effectively is because they sort of agree with Bernie on the ends. They just disagree on the means. Joe Biden made that perfectly clear. He actually suggested that having a Medicare option, right, a public option, is the fastest way to universal health care. So he basically says we'll get to Medicare for all anyway. It's just a question of doing it step by step. Here is Joe Biden soft pedaling Bernie's agenda.
But this time, we're going to be able to do what President Obama and I wanted to do in the first place. Add a public option, a Medicare-like public option. This is the fastest way to get coverage for everybody.
Okay, so really, again, he's basically saying that he wants the public option. And like Pete Buttigieg, he believes that eventually that's going to morph into the only option. But Biden's big pitch here is that you're going to get all the things that you want with Bernie, except I'm actually going to do them. Here is Biden saying that people can talk revolution as much as they want, but I'm the practical, on-the-ground guy. If, in fact, Biden does well in South Carolina, you could see a world where Biden does well in South Carolina, emerges from Super Tuesday, and then Obama endorses. That you could see. You really could. Like if it comes down to Biden versus Bernie, and then Obama throws in a late endorsement in favor of Biden because basically that puts Biden over the top, that's something that is certainly not implausible. Here is Biden talking about why he believes that he is the best choice instead of Bernie.
Today, people are talking about a revolution. What the country's looking for are results. What they're looking for is security. What they're looking for is to be able to sustain and maintain their dignity.
Okay, again, Joe Biden is he's basically just default non-Bernie candidate. Well, if any one default non-Bernie candidate can walk away with big victory in South Carolina, that changes things rather radically. Meanwhile, Nancy Pelosi is beginning to get used to the idea of Bernie as the nominee. According to Jeff Bennett reporting, he says Pelosi tells reporters that she is comfortable with Bernie Sanders as a potential nominee and doesn't think he jeopardized the House majority. She said, I think whoever our nominee is, we will enthusiastically embrace and we will win the White House, the Senate, and the House. Of course she's going to say that. Of course she's going to say that. By the way, Bloomberg has already said that he is not tossing one dime, not one dime, toward Bernie Sanders if Bernie wins the nomination. And he's not going to spend one narrow dime on Bernie. So the Democrats are taking that into account too. They're figuring, okay, well, if this turns into a two-person race, watch for the money to come in to play. And honestly, if Biden wins South Carolina walking away, Bloomberg's smart move would be to pull out but continue to run the ads. It'd be to endorse Biden and then continue to run the ads against Bernie. That would be the way to guarantee that Bernie doesn't get the nomination if that's truly what Bloomberg cares about. But ego plays so much into this stuff, guys. I mean, Bloomberg probably won't pull out even if it's obvious that he's going nowhere, simply because he's got his ego and his cash invested in this thing.